With you, sir.
Your Excellency,
Your
we can hear-
Excellency,
we can
Madam Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, the former president of Liberia.
IT, may we kindly have a bio for the last speaker? We shall proceed. May I call to the podium Ms. Womba Mayondi, a gender and GBV analyst from United Nations Population Fund. Thank you. Our first speaker to unpack the topic, Ms. Anamela. That's you. Yes.
Good afternoon, everybody. We should be energized just from having tea. But you don't sound energized that, oh, good afternoon, everybody. That sounds much, much better. So I would like to start my talk, I'm going to call it a talk, with some personal experiences that have led me in a way to where I am now. Many, many years ago, and I say many years ago, when I graduated from University of Zambia, I got a job in one of the banks. The policy then for most banks, as some of you may recall, was that graduates were started as what they called graduate employees or something along those lines. However, when I got my letter, I was appointed as a clerk. And my colleague with whom I had graduated with on the same day was appointed as what they called management graduate or something along those lines. So I went to the Human Resources Department and I asked, I said, why have I been appointed as a clerk when your policy clearly states that graduates should come in as management graduates or something? So I wasn't given an answer the first time. I went, I think, about twice after that, and I insisted. I went back. So the answer I eventually got from Human Resources was that you are a woman, and because you are a woman, you could get pregnant, and when you are pregnant, we will lose your services for a while. I thought, really, is that what the policy says? Anyway, the short of that is that I resigned on those grounds and went to find another job, and I thought that my issues were over. But when I went to this new job, shortly after, after some time, I was elevated to a position of a head of department. And those who might recall, in those days, parastatal organizations had very excellent conditions of service where they would give you a house, a car, and all that. So after I was elevated, and I'd just gotten married then, I was expecting to be given a house, or the alternative was for you to get housing allowance. I didn't get a house because they said I was living in my husband's house, but I thought, of course, I'll get a housing allowance. So there were 7 of us heads of departments, 5 were men, 1 was another lady who was single, and then there was me. So the other lady was given a house. When my pay slip came, no housing allowance. So I asked, I said, why don't I have a housing allowance? Because I'm not living in an institutional house. And I was told, you cannot get that because you are married. And because you are married, you're supposed to be staying in your husband's house. I thought, what? Anyway, I didn't leave that institution because then I realized that I'd keep job hunting. Then the third thing that jolted me around gender inequalities, I walked into a bank and wanted to open an account. And I was told, we cannot open your account, you need a letter from your husband. So I said, why would I need a letter from my husband? In any case, my registration card is in my maiden name. I was told, you cannot, if you didn't have a husband, we would want you to have a letter from your father, or your brother, or your uncle. Anyway, the short is, I did not leave that bank until I was given an account. I insisted, and I went into the branch manager's office. I won't name the bank, it's still around. But when we talk about women's empowerment, when we talk about gender issues, some people actually look at us and think we're just noisemakers. They think we're just here to ruffle feathers. But these issues were very real then. We've overcome them through targeted advocacy, through legal processes, through sensitization. However, while we've overcome those sorts of things which look very, very basic, we still have a very long way to go. And this is why we have a women's movement. So my task today is to talk about the evolution of the women's movement in Zambia, so that we understand why we are here, where we came from, and why we still need to keep going. Because some people think we have arrived because we have a female vice president. Some people think we've arrived because we have the first female Speaker of the National Assembly. I need not remind you of some of the other figures out there, the other data out there. 3 women in cabinet out of 25 seats. Now, with other female parliamentarians having lost their seats, we only have about 13% women in parliament, 7% local government. That's why we still need to go on. We have gender-based violence, which affects up to about 75 or 78% of women and girls are the victims. So there is need to still go on. There are a lot of things happening, child marriages, early pregnancies, which take women out of school. So this is why we stay focused on issues of gender equity and equality. So, okay. The women's movement in Zambia has been evolving right from the pre-independence days. There were some organized efforts even then, which centered around supporting men actually at the time mostly, in the struggle for independence. Next slide. And at the time, women mostly played crucial roles in agriculture, family organization, and community welfare. But the leadership was primarily the preserve of men. And during that period, women were largely excluded from formal education, wage employment, and political leadership. And this was really reinforced by issues of patriarchy and the gender inequalities that existed then. Next slide. So this might be a very shocking picture. Forgive me that I bring this picture here, but I want us to know the reality. Pre-independence, women still took to the street. And some people may condemn their style, but traditionally, I think some of you may know this, that traditionally when a woman was very, very upset, even my grandmother, forgive me for using senga, should say, nikuvulile, nikunyate, like I'm so upset with you, I'm going to tear off my blouse or something. So this was the way that they knew how to demonstrate at that time. Times have moved on and we may have changed the way we do things, but these were women ready to go out and to express their voices around colonialism. So from a very long time, we had women that were political actors, as we can see. Post-independence, UNIP came in. We had very powerful women who had participated then in the pre-colonial struggles and then came into UNIP as well. I think some of you might know some of the names of women that were referred to as veteran politicians, freedom fighters, the Mama Kankasas, the Zenia Ndlovus, and many others. Next. Then there came a time when Zambia got more exposed to what was happening internationally. And that was when we birthed a coordinated women's movement, because the realization had come at that time that as single organizations, we really would not make the impact that we wanted to. We therefore decided, after having attended the UN World Conference in Nairobi in 1985, that we needed to come together and develop a more coordinated approach to our issues around gender equity and equality. And the organizations that are listed there were the organizations that birthed NGOCC as it is today. At that time, I think there were only 11 organizations, and they developed what was called a coordinating committee for gender equity and equality. Next, please. And after that coordinated approach, we began to experience certain landmark victories because of this one voice that we had created. And during the period from around 1989, we had influential women like Sarah Longwe, who I'm sure most of you would know, the late Nora Mumba, who championed the cause of widows' rights, and pushed the government for legislative change. And one of the biggest achievements then was the interstate law of succession. You will recall that before this law, a lot of women and orphans were subjected to terrible treatment after the death of a male spouse, where it was believed that they had no right to property and no right to anything, no right to any inheritance at all. Next. Then in the 1990s and to about 1995, we had another reawakening of the women's movement. And this was the birth of organizations like the National Women's Lobby, which is a member of NGOCC. And that began to focus now on women in leadership, and particularly women in politics. And we began to also advocate for a gender policy, and then looked at strengthening the coordinating role of an institution such as NGOCC. 1995 to the 2000s, we began to expand our influence and to take action at grassroots level. This was following the post-Beijing platform, and we grew in strength. And one of the things that we began to do at grassroots level, for example, we have an example there of Kwasha Mkwenu, was to begin to strengthen the members of NGOCC and other grassroots level organizations by ensuring that we built their capacity in various ways, including trying to ensure that they had resources in order for them to carry out their interventions. And at that time, may you go back a bit? At that time, we also realized that issues of gender equity and equality were largely about also defending our democracy, because democracy is about inclusion, and as long as a big section of the community, and here referring to women and girls, were not part of the democratic dispensation, then we really had no democracy at all. And we became a critical voice in opposing President Chiluba's third term bid. I think maybe some of you may recall. And from then onwards, we decided that we're going to be strongly involved in issues of policy, legal reform, and generally democracy. The 2000 to around 2005, we began to build a critical mass. That graph shows the number of NGOCC membership growing. At the moment, we have 118 member organizations. I think by the end of the year, looking at the applications that we have, we might go to about 125 member organizations. And then we launched then an M2000 initiative in 2001, whose goal was to build a critical mass for gender inequality, against gender inequality. This involved advocacy, training, and especially training for female political candidates so that we could increase the numbers. 2005 to 2015, we had a few legislative victories and high-level representation. We still had challenges like political violence. Women's advocacy became more targeted in order for us to be more impactful. And we then began the push for 50-50 representation. We have the SADC Gender Protocol, which actually stipulates that we should all go for 50-50 representation in any elected positions or any appointed positions. And then we also, at that time, saw the coming in of the first female vice president, Madam Inonge Wina. And just to let you know, Madam Inonge Wina came from NGOCC. She was the chairperson of NGOCC, and she transitioned into politics with the support of the Gender Equity and Equality Act. So those are some of the legislative victories that we saw at the time. Next. 2015 to 2020, we began to consolidate and get into new frontiers. We added gender. Initially, we were NGO, non-governmental organizations coordinating committee. Then we became non-governmental gender organizations coordinating council, just to reaffirm who we were and what we were about. And we were very instrumental in calling for a people-driven constitution. Up to now, what we're really calling for is the expanded Bill of Rights, because we know that the expanded Bill of Rights will protect women and girls from social and economic exploitation. We championed women's land rights through advocacy, contributing to the 2018 National Lands Policy. We responded to the COVID-19 pandemic by supporting women's economic resilience and securing educational opportunities during the school closures. Next. From about 2020 to now, we have about 5 strategic areas of focus, and we have continued our advocacy efforts. So we work around harmful cultural norms. This is norm shifting. I think we've heard even over the 2 days from yesterday to today, how patriarchy and how attitudes, norms, and beliefs shape the landscape in Zambia. The reason why we have very few women in leadership and in politics is because of the cultural norms and beliefs. We work with women in politics. In fact, they meet at the NGOCC office once a month. These are women in politics from all the political parties, and they come with different stories. Some of them tell us how the entire family just stands against them and says, you cannot stand because you're a woman. That is not your role as a woman. We've had women who've been divorced simply because they decided they were going to stand when their partners did not approve of it. We've had women who've been sometimes ostracized from the family simply because they've decided to stand. And the male members, and even women, by the way, have also fought against their decisions. So harmful and cultural norms are very, very important for us to address these challenges. Actually, what we see from the bottom right up to the top leadership, where we find gender discrimination, the bottom line and the root cause of it are the norms and cultural practices. We also focus on climate resilience, knowing what is happening in our country and the world at large now. I think I don't even need to belabor this. We know what this is about. We look at economic inclusion, because that is one of the bedrocks also for the empowerment of women. Right now, a lot of female politicians are saying they have serious challenges around resource mobilization for them to stand for the elections. So if we begin to strengthen them economically, what we anticipate is that that will help them, even with their political ambitions. But also there are other issues around economic inclusion. For example, there are a lot of women that have chosen to stay in abusive marriages where they actually experience gender-based violence and their lives are at risk, but they cannot leave because they have no economic livelihood alternative besides that person that actually is the abuser. I think you might all recall, I mean, I don't need to remind prosecutors, you know these cases. The case of the 3 women, I think that was last year, who were married to one man, and the man had been defiling the daughter, and these women actually opted to give away, including the biological mother, to give away that child to the social system, and alternatively to get the husband out of detention. That was, for me, that was one of my saddest moments in this work that I do. But that is the extent to which women, sometimes who are economically deprived, can go to because they have no alternative. He was the breadwinner, and all they thought about was what will happen to us and the other children. And sometimes when these things happen, try to understand the underlying issues and don't just condemn women for being passive or staying in certain situations. There are bigger issues that keep them there. And we continue to look at legal and political reform, pushing for constitutional reviews and increasing women's participation. Then, very, very important, reproductive health rights. Women have a right to decide when they should have children. Women have a right to be safe in delivery. Women have a right to have healthy children to make their lives easier, because we all know that women are caregivers. When there's sickness in the home, women are caregivers and they're taken away from other productive ventures. Next. So the efficacy of women's participation in governance. We have, I won't go into the details there, but we have over the years really influenced policy, as I have said. We have seen changes in leadership, though not sufficient. We have seen, for example, the coming in of progressive laws like the re-entry policy. In the past, if a girl child got pregnant in school and the father was a fellow student or pupil or learner, the girl would be expelled for good. But now girls are allowed to go back into school. So there are a lot of progressive things that have happened over the years. And when it comes to governance, we have seen also, I think, one of the key examples, as was indicated yesterday, in the judiciary, we have a lot of women, I think 60% in leadership roles, and that is very, very progressive. We also have seen a lot of progression, I think even in some of the defense forces, where we hear that a lot of women now are even taking on some of the roles that were basically only for men. For example, driving trucks and things like that. Next. So what are the challenges that still face women in politics? As I said before, patriarchal norms. These are deep-seated cultural norms, which often discourage women from pursuing leadership, as it is widely perceived as a male domain. And of course, there are the financial constraints that I spoke about. Statistics, I avoided bringing statistics here because I knew there would be statistics from other speakers. But even when it comes to economic empowerment, if it's gainful employment or just we find that women are fewer compared to their men, compared to male counterparts, and that women are less economically empowered than men. And then there are these systemic barriers that we continue to see. We know that political parties are the gatekeepers of women's participation in politics. Already, as the PS Gender said, we also as NGOCC have begun to receive reports where women are being pushed back from wanting to stand under the other seats that are, that are elected, the first past the post seats, because now the keepers of these political parties, who are usually men, are saying you've got a quota for yourselves, so why do you want to stand in these other positions? That is something that we need to look out, because women, while we have a quota, it has been necessary because we still have those patriarchal norms. We still need affirmative action in certain ways because we still have patriarchal norms. We have not arrived yet as a country to begin to say that the playing field is level for men and women and boys and girls, and this is why we still need we still need affirmative action in certain ways. So the political party structures are barriers. They disadvantage women in many ways. Firstly is that they tend to prioritize male candidates. And furthermore, we heard around the issues of sextortion. Those, tend to discourage women from participating. There's all sorts of harassment, intimidation, and now we have technologically facilitated violence. So there are a lot of issues that discourage women. And women actually tell us, I would not like to participate in politics. I don't want my children to see funny stories about me, even if they're not true, on social media. So a lot of issues, deter women from participating. Now, we have seen some political shifts in the gender machinery, and a few years ago, we did actually get a Minister of Gender, which showed some political will around addressing women's issues and gender issues generally. However, we saw this downgraded to a division in 2021. We have still tried to strengthen the legal policy framework to promote gender equality. However, looking at all the women that are sitting in this room, all the women out there, why wouldn't it be practicable to find 50% women when our population is that more than 50% are women? Why would it not be practicable to find women that are qualified to meet the 50-50 quota? So we have laws, but the issue is implementation, and organizations such as NGOCC are here to also monitor implementation of these laws. So the recommendations now for strengthening women's participation. Yes, gender quotas are good, and these should start from political party level. One of the issues we have been advocating for as NGOCC is the enactment of the political parties law, which I think my colleague Muzi Kamanga will speak about more. But if this political party law were in place, what we'd like to see in it is that it should compel political parties to nominate women to have equal representation in the intra-party positions, and then also to have to compel them to nominate 50-50 when it comes to nomination for political office and elective office. We would also like to ensure that there's an investment in the genuine empowerment of women, which includes education, economic empowerment, and programs that build the skills and confidence that are necessary for women and girls to reach their fullest potential. We'd like to see a reform of political parties, as I indicated, and would like to see that civil society organizations are supported to continue to hold government to account, and are supported to continue to carry out the civic education and advocacy to encourage active participation of women and girls. And in conclusion, the women's movement, I think, is a very good example of a story of resilience and determination. From where it started to now, we have fought all sorts of battles, and we have won some and lost some. And this is an ongoing challenge that I think all of us should take on personally. Because as long as there is inequality in this country, there is no democracy. Only women know their lived experiences. I started here by talking about some of what I experienced in my earlier years, and it is those experiences that make me know and make me certain that there are gender inequalities in this country. When you women get to sit at the table, you will express your lived experiences, and those lived experiences will get into policy, legal reform, and everything that a democratic society does. Therefore, this fight is for all of us. And I urge all of you, having known where the women's movement started from, and knowing that we have a long way to go, to please come on board, and let's ensure that women and girls reach their fullest potential. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that wonderful presentation. I call to the podium Mr. Kamanga.
Allow me to take cognizance of the Director of Public Prosecution's presence, Mr. Gilbert Piri, State Counsel, senior government officials present in here. May I say distinguished prosecutors. My task today is to present a picture of the critical role that women play in a democratic dispensation. I must say this little point. Most of the times when I've been invited to go to talk about these issues relating to women, be it politics, health, reproductive health, economic empowerment, and anything, usually the talks are in the afternoon, just after lunch. I don't know, for whatever reason here, I'm happy that it was put before lunch, which is an improvement, and I hope that as Zambia moves forward, there will be an improvement when it comes to issues of women. Next slide. I was going to run the risk, or I'm going to run the risk of sounding elementary by trying to present what democracy is. But for the sake of having our discussion today structured, please allow me to just be very elementary. I've been guided that we are quite hard pressed on time, so I also try to be as fast as I possibly can. Democracy is a framework of governance built on the principle that power resides with the people, inclusive of human beings we call women. In a democracy, citizens, including women, exercise authority either directly or indirectly through elected officials or representatives, as it were, ensuring that government decisions reflect the collective will of the people while protecting their individual rights. Modern democracies relies on checks and balances, constitutional protections, citizens' participation, and institutions that prevent power concentrations by ensuring that all are taken on board. These elements, ladies and gentlemen, create a framework where citizens can meaningfully influence government decisions through various participatory mechanisms, including elections. Democracy presupposes political equality, that everyone has equal rights to participate in democracy, regardless of their background, regardless of their social standing, or indeed gender. Next slide. Why do women matter in a democracy? Women are critical players in any meaningful political dispensation worldwide, and Zambia is not an exception to that. Women's participation in politics is crucial for strengthening democracy, fostering inclusive governance, and advancing gender equality. Women's participation in politics tend to give credence to the credibility of any democratic nation, acting as the heartbeat of the system by ensuring the participation of democratic groups. I don't know if any of you recall or have read the story of the reasons our founding father, Dr. Kenneth Kaunda, gave for losing elections in 1991. There's an ironic statement he said. In conceding defeat, he said, "Where were the women voters?" Although, for the big man, he never also said, "Where were the women candidates?" UNIP, like the MMD, had fewer women candidates standing in those elections. And UNIP's justification for the loss was that a number of women were turned away by their husbands or the violence that characterized the 1991 elections, and that could have attributed to him losing power. But that can also underscore the importance of having women as both voters as well as candidates in any election that has credibility. In Zambia, women constitute the largest voting bloc. Let's take, for instance, in the 2021 elections. Of the 7,023,000 certified registered voters, 3.7 million were females, representing 53% of the voting bloc, while 3.2, representing 46%, were men. That underscores just how important women are. Later on, we'll look at how women were fared in terms of candidature. Women's participation directly influences policy priorities, shifts focus towards critical areas that are so often neglected, such as social welfare, healthcare, and education. Next slide. Some of the key benefits of women participating in elections are as follows. One, it does lead to improved policy outcomes. I think Mrs. Anamela, as she was going through her presentation, did allude to this, that women in politics often prioritize issues that others tend to overlook, such as healthcare, such as education, childcare, and infrastructure. They are more likely to support legislation once put in the in the chambers of lawmaking that will support families, that will also promote gender equality and make our societies or communities stronger. The other benefit they bring on the table is economic growth. Evidence seems to show that greater women's participation is linked to higher GDP growth. And if you want examples, you can just look at Scandinavian countries where women participation is quite high, and they tend, after that outlook, they tended to have greater GDP growth. Women leaders often champion policies like paid family leave, childcare, which increase labor force participation, particularly among this group of women. They also strengthen democracy. Women's participation increases government accountability, not only to women, but to most underrepresented groups in our communities. It enhances trust in government and encourages broader civic engagement. Next slide, please. The other benefit that is notable is effective and collaborative governance. Studies seem to indicate that women in politics tend to work across party lines and are highly responsive for constituent needs, often making government more inclusive and closer to the people it tends to serve. They also have an effect of lasting peace and reduced corruption. Greater gender equality in government is linked to more sustainable conflict resolution, lower levels of human rights abuses. Studies also do suggest that women's leadership can help reduce corruption and increase public trust. I think for the many cases that you prosecute related to corruption, even during your time at ACC, probably you agree with me that you had more male customers than you did female. And this is what this point is trying to drive home. They also are very good role models. Women political leaders tend to act as role models, increasing the likelihood that women and girls will participate in the political process. And for those of us who are fathers to girls, I think this point easily drives home that case. Next slide, please. What is the case of women's participation in politics? Women in Zambia have played a very growing role in politics, suffice to say a limited, facing significant underrepresentation despite constituting over 51% of our population. Voters versus candidates. When it comes to this issue, women tend to be the majority of voters, but the minority of candidates. And our recent elections do show that. Therefore, this leads to low representation of women. Currently, women hold about 15% of parliamentary seats as of 2025, and roughly about 8% of local government seats, falling short of our country's commitments, international and regional commitments. That seems to suggest that we should be hovering around 50%. Of course, as Mrs. Anamela did state, you may argue that we've made notable progress in terms of women participation. Not too long ago, in 2015, we were the first female vice president. 2021 saw another female vice president. We also have, in 2021, the first female speaker of our National Assembly. But these are very isolated cases when you look at it within the whole spectrum of women's participation at governance levels. And let's have a look at those statistics. The overall state of women's political participation in Zambia is very concerning, with the country, like I stated earlier, failing to meet continental and international benchmarks, such as the ones that are set by the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, the Protocol to the African Charter on the Rights of Women in Africa, otherwise known as the Maputo Protocol, as well as the SADC Protocol, which all advocate for a 50% representation. For the period 2016 to 2021, at the local government level, out of 1,624 wards that were up for grabs in those elections, 126 female candidates made it to the council chambers, representing 7.8%. Whereas at the parliamentary level, out of the 156 seats that were present, only 26 of those were won by women, representing 16.7% at National Assembly level. At cabinet level, out of the 22 seats at cabinet, only 9 were reserved for women, or at least were given to women, representing a 40%. When you contrast these with the 2021 elections, you may see that the 2021 elections, with all the positives it had, which is that it did demonstrate that when our people are not happy with the government, they can change it. Also, there was an aspect of youth participation, that our youth are the key, or at least do have a key role to play in elections. So those were the positives about 2021. But there's another hidden element about 2021 which we've not talked about, which is that 2021 saw the numbers of women in the assembly going down. From 1991 to 2016, there was an incremental progress for women participation levels, both at local government level, at parliament level. Although, of course, at the vice president level, you would say that because of constitutional limitations, we didn't have a running mate, and the presidents we had between 1991 and 2016 were not compelled to choose a female candidate. In 1991, women representation in parliament was 7%. For the 2006 elections, this number increased to 14%. In 2021, this number went to 17%, as I earlier stated. That is in 2016, my apologies. For 2021, however, this number dropped to 13%. Next slide. This number dropped to 13% in 2021. At the local government level, the number dropped to 7.6%. So you would see that with all the positives that we have to talk about 2021, when it comes to female representation, the story is a different one. Suffice that of going backwards. Unlike the way 2016 was, unlike the way 2011 was, as well as 2006. What are the challenges that women face in elections? There are many challenges that women face in elections, and allow me to quote the EU report on the 2021 elections that attributed the decrease in numbers of women political participation to several factors, including violence ahead of the elections. And I'm happy that the issue of violence has been well articulated at this conference. In Zambia, violence often increases in the past ahead of crucial elections that lead. In both years, the numbers of women participation, especially at parliamentary level, decrease. The challenges that candidates in rural areas face is also another issue that we need to address our minds to, especially when it comes to verifying the academic qualifications that are needed to run for political office. The other challenge that can be attributed to low participation of women in elections is the emergence of the big man syndrome in political parties. Do correct me if I'm wrong, apart from the Golden Party and the Heritage Party, I think all the political parties are headed by men. And when you go through the party structures and regulatory framework of these institutions, you can't seem to run away from the fact that these are personal to hold the political parties of the respective men who hold those parties. I will not mention the names of these parties, but you will, I think, agree with me that whoever is president of a political party does seem to be the emperor in that party. And that has a negative effect on women's effective participation in that political party. Because us as men, we are products of our societies. The patriarchy that defines our societies tend to be the ones that we go with in these public offices. Because I believe that as a woman, her role is in the kitchen. I will take that thinking with me in these public offices. As we go for these crucial elections, my view is that you women should play not so much of a prominent role. Yours will be to cook for the candidates at the command center. Yours will be to make sure that, the candidates have everything on their hands. And that tends to discourage the women. And what has been added in this year's constitutional changes, and I'll talk about them briefly, is that the guaranteed 20 women seats under mixed member representation may also bring another dimension to this. You are already catered for under 20 seats. May you please support me. Without being speculative, you probably have seen, if you're observant, that there's one candidate who is going around the country campaigning, and is always in the company of senior women of his party. He is campaigning, they're helping him mobilize. Probably the promise is that once I get it, you will fall under the 20 seats that are there. Next slide. Overall, the obstacles to women's participation in Zambia can be divided into three main categories: structural barriers, legislative and policy challenges, and barriers related to electoral processes and procedures. On structural barriers, Zambia's patriarchal society represents a major structural barrier, traditionally assigning more power and resources to men than women. And Mrs. Anamela did talk about this, and I won't belabor this point. The second set of challenges stems from the weakness in the legal and policy framework, as well as the poor implementation of existing laws. When you look at Zambia's legal framework, when you go through it critically, you tend to get the impression that it is made or structured in a very compromised way. Like it's very apologetic when it wants to provide for women's participation in the electoral system. Discretionary terms such as may will be used, including in the country's main legislative framework, the Constitution. Because the way we relate to the Constitution as a grand norm of the country is that it is a command to us. If you go by Article 1, it commands us to do whatever it is that it provides for. But when it comes to women's participation issues, the Constitution takes another language, discretionary, on whoever holds the power. Other factor that we need to consider is that the male political landscapes tends to lack commitment to implement the any progressive constitutional provisions that has inclusive governance. Next slide. I'll try to demonstrate this in a bit. Next slide. Oh, thank you. Third is that the electoral procedures managed by the electoral team, or is it the commission, the police, the department for issuing national registration cards or identity, tend to disadvantage women. For instance, when it comes to the police sometimes fail to curtail election-related violence, especially violence that is caused by people who are near to the levers of power. Poor election infrastructure, particularly for those who are physically disadvantaged. Sometimes the rushed distribution of national registration cards, lack of civic education also do impede women's ability to vote on election day. Next slide. As we talk about women's participation in the electoral process in Zambia, we cannot avoid but talk about the constitutional changes that we had not too long ago. That is the Constitution of Zambia Amendment number 13 of 2025, the brainchild of, depending on which political spectrum you are, the infamous or famous Bill 7. I know some of you from your seats, I think, were maybe disappointed with those of us from civil society that had reservations on Bill 7. If I may be allowed to just share some of our reasons why we were not so eager with Bill 7. It wasn't so much about the contents of Bill 7. It was about the process of Bill 7. We thought that for any law that wants to address the issues that affect the masses of our people, any law that is the grand norm of the country, process is very important. And under Bill 7, it's hard to say that was adhered to. I'm one of those who believe that a constitution is not an instrument for a government to restrain the people. A constitution, on the other hand, is an instrument for the people to restrain their government. What some of us observed about Bill 7 is that Bill 7 was done with very little consultations, selective consultations. Those of us who probably are not close to the political powers that be were not included or consulted on a number of issues. I'm told it started with a process they called contentious and non-contentious issues. How what is non-contentious was arrived at, I'll never know, but somehow it was done. After non-contentious issues was done by a very privileged small group of people, they started working on the provisions that they felt needed to be changed. After that, they decided to appoint a technical team, or whatever process, term you may refer to that, a constitutional review team, sent around the country. Within a short period, while they were around the country, the bill was resuscitated in Parliament. And very little, if at all anything, of what it brought on board was adopted because they were running against time. Those were the issues that we felt needed to be addressed for any constitution to work for the people. And some of those challenges that we had observed about process may come to haunt us not too long from now. Although I'm made to believe that the Attorney General did indicate in the press not too long ago that if the UPND administration will be re-elected, they will embark on what he called comprehensive constitutional review next year. Perhaps a diplomatic acknowledgement to say that the most recent amendments were not done in a manner they also feel comfortable with. Bill 7, however, did object itself to revise the electoral system for elections to the National Assembly to provide for mixed member proportional representation, adding another layer to our electoral system. Remember, our electoral system is defined by two layers. That is majoritarian for whoever runs for office of presidents, and then secondly, first past the post. My view is that based on what was enacted in under Amendment number 13, we still have a two-layer system or two electoral tiered system, which is majoritarian and first past the post. Save that for majoritarian. Thank you very much. I'm being reminded that I've got 2 minutes. Is it 5? Sorry? Okay. I know for prosecutors, especially that you work for Boma, sometimes discussing politics might not be comfortable. But please indulge me because this is the work I do. The majoritarian one also allows us to elect a running mate. So it has a small group, which is that majoritarian, and then election of a running mate as vice president of the country. And then based on how they've defined it, that the mixed member representation, when it comes to election to the National Assembly, will be based on the presidential elections. and are made to believe the ones for majoritarian. If we go to the second ballot, they'll still consider the one that was done first. So meaning that we still have a two-tier system, the majoritarian one with two now subgroups, which is the running mate one as one, then secondly the mixed member proportional representation. And then the second tier we have is the first past the post. Then it also aims to revise the composition of the National Assembly to provide for an increase in the number of constituency-based seats from 156 to 226 to actualize the delimitation report by the ECZ, revise the number of nominated members of parliament from the current 8 members of parliament that are nominated by the president to 11. The next slide, please. When it comes to amendment number 13 of 2025, you may say that it does represent an improvement when it comes to guaranteeing the number of women in parliament and also in the local government chambers, unlike the 2016 amendment number 2 of 2016. The 2016 amendment only offered one guaranteed seat in the National Assembly for women out of the 168 seats that were present there, representing a 6% female guaranteed seat. Remember, under Article 82, Subarticle 3, the Constitution did state that in the National Assembly, for the Deputy Speaker of the National Assembly, the two Deputy Speakers of the National Assembly should not be members of the same gender. That is the only guaranteed seat that was provided for women. In terms of a running mate, the Constitution does not offer a guaranteed seat that it should be a female candidate. It is possible that all the presidential candidates may choose male candidates as running mates. For the Speaker, there is no guaranteed position under the Constitution that the Speaker of the National Assembly should be female. So it is possible that after elections, whoever wins as president and his party may push for a male Speaker. And when you consider the fact that we have these 226 seats and 20 seats guaranteed for women, that will give you some idea, speculatively that is, in terms of how this election might go when it comes to female representation. Just to talk about the 2025 amendment. It does provide 30 guaranteed seats for women. That is 40 under mixed member representation seats. Out of the 40 mixed member representation, 20 are reserved for women, 15 are reserved for youth, and 5 are reserved for persons with disabilities. How do we arrive at the 30 guaranteed seats? We have 20 that are guaranteed for women, right? Then for the 15 that are there, the electoral process bill says that they should be chosen in alternates of male and female. So out of the 15 seats that we will have, the least number of women that we can have for youths will be 7, assuming the first names to come will be male, the second female. So we'll have 7 there. 20 plus 7, that's 27. Out of the 5 seats guaranteed for persons with disabilities, the least number of females you can have there is 2, assuming the first name on the list will be males for all the political parties. So at least 2 of those will be female. So 20 plus 7 plus 2, that's 29. And then we still have 1 guaranteed seat for the Deputy Speaker of the National Assembly. That for the 2 Deputy Speakers of the National Assembly, they should not be members of the same gender. So we'll have 1 there. 1 plus the 29, we have 30. Comparatively, this represents an improvement when it comes to the 2016 Constitutional Amendment as well as under the 2025 Constitutional Amendment. Because we're moving from 1, which is 6%, to 30, which is 10.7%. However, the 2025 seats, when you look at what they cry, what they demand, what the concern has been as far as women's representation is concerned, may be a drop in the ocean. And this is where my argument that the process of making this constitution was not consultative, because some of the views that leading personalities, including NGOCC and others, had on the constitution regarding guaranteeing women's effective participation through increased numbers of women in the National Assembly and other elective bodies could have been taken on board, had government consulted widely, had government taken its time in ensuring that all sectors of our people are consulted when it comes to a law that defines their country, the Constitution. The demand has been that let's increase the numbers of women in Parliament. If you are going to move from 6% to 10.7%, which is a margin of about maybe 4.7%, that, to be honest, is a drop in the ocean. And from where we stand, I can safely argue that the 2025 amendment was a missed opportunity in increasing the numbers of females in the National Assembly. Look at it another way. Out of the 226 seats, it is possible that the majority of political parties will choose less women to stand. So the only lifeline that will remain for women participation in the Assembly will be their guaranteed seats under women, under mixed member representation of the 20 for women, the 15 for youths, and the 2 for men, for persons with disability, the 5. That will represent a drop from where we are. Currently, we are at about 15% female representation in Parliament, but also this figure does not take into account the 2 seats that were lost by women, one in Chawama by Honorable Tasira Lungu, and then the other one in Mufue by Honorable Maureen Mabenga. Is it Maunga, if I have gotten the name correct? For the other by-elections that were held in Kwacha, in Petauke, all those seats were held by men, and all those seats were also replaced by men. So the numbers of males in Parliament has not significantly changed as a result of the elections, insofar as our point is concerned here. While the Constitution under Article 8 notes that national values and principles shall include equality and non-discrimination, the same Constitution, like I earlier stated, offers a number of compromised provisions that offers a blank check to power holders to undermine issues of gender provision. For instance, Article 259(10)(b), as was alluded to by Mrs. Anamela, provides that all appointments to public offices should be on a basis of 50% representation of gender, and then adds a beautiful wording that unless it is not practical to do so. In dealing with Article 69 on the nominations of MPs, the current Constitution, or before the amendments, the Constitution was offering 8 seats. Out of the 8 seats, you would expect that 4 will be female and 4 male. But however, the Constitution also gives the President the latitude to say he may also make other considerations when it comes to special interest skills and gender. Currently, out of the 8, only 2 are females, 6 are males, and that gives you an idea of where we are. I was going to talk about the councils in terms of the representation there, but I've been told to wind up. So I'll wind up to just say the councils under the new constitutional order does offer a guaranteed seats, both for councils with representation of 20 wards or less, those between 20 wards to 30 wards, as well as those with above 31 wards, which is a huge improvement to the 2016 elections. Lastly, as I conclude, moderator, as I conclude, may I also briefly talk about the gender machinery. That in order for Zambia to actualize equal participation of men and women in politics, there is need for us to relook at the gender machinery. The gender machinery currently in Zambia is very problematic. Of course, the Constitution, as it should be the case, under Part 18, has established a number of commissions. 16 commissions have been established. Out of those 16 commissions, only 3 have not been operationalized. the Lands Commission, the Parliamentary Service Commission, and I stand to be corrected on this, and most obviously, the Gender Equity and Equality Commission, for reasons that we do not know why the case is so. The Constitution's insistence to establish the Gender Commission was that the Gender Commission is a quasi-judicial body that will hold political players to account for any gender provisions that they may not do that they may not fulfill under the law. The ministry is very important, but you see, the ministry is a policy implementer of the government of the day. The ministry cannot implement fully what a quasi-judicial body such as the Gender Commission can implement. You can imagine the gender division cannot call a political party in opposition to ask them why they have not adopted a certain number of women. But the Gender Commission, on the other hand, can do so. So until we have a Gender Commission, until we re-look at our gender machinery, we will continue to have a number of challenges when it comes to effective participation of women in the electoral process. And our view is that you prosecutors, as you try to lead credence to our electoral process, may join us in demanding for a Gender Commission for the good of our country and the effective participation of all, including women. I end here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that presentation. We'll now call upon our last speaker. Unfortunately, the one who's going to hold us, please stick to the time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I do not take it lightly that you people are still seated here and willing to listen to us, but without further wastage of time, I'll go straight into what I have prepared for today. So I think we'll skip my bio, we'll go straight to my presentation. But before we do so, I just want to acknowledge the fact that the learned DPP is even here waiting to listen to our presentation, because we are talking about a lot of issues that are social in nature. And my hope, anyway, for this particular set of the three presentations is to convert some of us to a place where we can have some social aspect to the work that we do. So I'll start with four stories quickly before I go to my presentation. One story is something that was run on public television, which I saw myself, not that somebody reported to me, where a group of young men actually mentioned on public media that they were going to gang rape one prominent female politician. And it was carried just as graphic as that. The other story I'll share with you is one themselves. And because of that, I want to see if some of us seated here can look at life from various angles. So we'll talk about women's movements in general, from the days of the suffrage, from everywhere. I think women have advocated, not only in Zambia, in the Far East, in the Middle East, you name it. Latin America, we can't even talk. So what are we talking about? We're talking about just a diverse group of people trying to look at the political, social, and economic parity. Just trying, you can click the next, please. Just trying to make sure that our issues are advocated for. So women's movement, a series of social, political campaigns, legal and social and economic, personal spheres, everywhere they've advocated. We've heard about opening the bank with a letter. In fact, those were some of the things that we found, even ourselves, who are a bit, maybe let's say middle-aged or younger generation. Even from the women's movement, they were still talking about that. So how do we talk about reproductive rights? How do we talk about equal pay, combating violence? And historically, women's movements, suffrage, they have always advocated for these issues around reproductive rights. Why should we sit here and a sister is dying while giving birth across the road in Levy Hospital or even in UTH? Why should it be in that we still have women losing life when giving life? Why should we have a system where some things which should be straightforward, you really need to put up a fight? Domestic violence, maternity leave, equal pay, sexual harassment in the workplace. I remember once I even offended somebody. I was saying we need sexual harassment service. What was I told? No, Womba, we cannot deal with that because the public service has a robust code of conduct. Have you interrogated it? Have you seen that there is nothing around sexual harassment in the workplace? So all these things that remove from women's participation across all spheres. Politics is just one sphere, but there are so many places where we've seen that women still lag behind. Young women were still. So I think we can go to the next. We've said something around the pre-independence era, but what I was trying to bring out on this slide is that at the end of the day, women voters, even now, still have to get permission from their husbands as to which candidate to vote for. It's a secret ballot. Who cares? If I'm there and he's not there, why should I care what he says? But this is the conditioning with which we come to the voting station, because I will not divorce myself from who I am. If I am an obedient wife, yes. If Mr. Chikunji tells me, Womba, we are all voting like that, I should do so. But because I'm an activist here and there, I will say, that's your problem. I will vote for the person I want to vote for. So we still have these patriarchal issues which are still with us. Women attending nominations. This one I heard from somebody from Mauritius, not even from Zambia, that the political party leaders, when she went for the interviews, they asked her, as a woman, you are married? Yes, I'm married. You have children? Yes, I have children. So when you are campaigning, who will be taking care of your husband? So she said, I had to think because I didn't expect that question. Who will be taking care of your children? So all we are saying is, what do we need to do? I will have the last slide on that, but definitely there is more that we need to do, even though we've come from a very long way. We can still click the next tab. So we have, this is a UN Women study, 58% of women parliamentarians in Europe, this is across the European Union spectrum, said they had been subjected to online attacks. So we are trying to say, if women cannot be safe to come out, what more can we do? Of course, we have a lot of barriers. I think grade 12 certificate, which came along the way, previously it wasn't there, but it came along the way. I know it was an inhibitor for some women. I know some women who wanted to stand, very mobilized women, like one Madame Kumalo, I remember her name vividly. She just said, grade 12, Utiala, and whatever in Senga. She was living in Petauke at that time. She was so distraught because she had prepared, she had mobilized, and along the way, this issue came out. So if we look at the way we have some of the situations in our communities, in our rural areas, if we talk about adolescent pregnancy, which removes you from the education system, where are you going to get a grade 12 certificate? If we talk about child marriage, which removes you from the school system because maybe your husband needs you to be home, where are you going to get your grade 12 certificate? We've talked about patriarchy. Unfortunately, I will not divorce myself even if I may be a high-ranking political party official, if I'm the one receiving nominations. If my mindset is patriarchal, I will still definitely ask those questions about who will take care of people at home when you are campaigning. That is not what I'll ask my fellow men. Negative social norms. Marital status, this one is a real struggle. If you are married, it's an issue. If you are single, you are there to get people's husbands. I think, again, we saw what happened in one election cycle, where one prominent figure, I don't even want to name, but there were a lot of pictures around her that she's coming to get your husbands, hide your husbands, whatsoever. So me, I'm asking myself, okay, it's in my other life, I also do these premarital things. Not that I'm an authority in that area, but just here and there. So I'm asking myself, so this husband is just sitting somewhere, doing nothing. This woman will come from wherever she will come from, get him and go with him, without him agreeing. Because that, when you say he will steal your husband, that is the, I don't know if I can use the word, that is the literal meaning of it. So someone even told me, you women's movement, that time I was even in civil society, what's wrong with you? And what could I answer? But anyway, that's a story for another day. So permission, we've talked about it. TFGBV, cyberbullying, online harassment, there we can't even cough. I think Dr. Nyasulu mentioned a lot in this area. Even now we are seeing it. I think even PS herself once narrated a story to me, and I actually laughed because the person who, let me say, they accused of impregnating her, I'm saying no. You are a stubborn woman. That's what I mean, she's my friend. Don't quote me, but she's my friend. I'm saying you are a stubborn woman. This man can make you pregnant. That's out of the way. But it was in social media, just like that. So all we are saying is, what more can we do? How can we just have this mindset? Financing, definitely we've talked about it. We can go to the next. Okay, we can go to the next again, since I don't have much time. Okay, just click the next tab. So we are trying to say, how do we advocate for some of the issues? Some we've talked about. I will mention the second point again. I think Mr. Kamanga mentioned it. Increased women's participation. In fact, increased meaningful women's participation and representation. Women should come to give solutions, to say something, not only to cook or dance or do nothing, but they are there. They should be at the table. They should be part of the decision makers. Maternity leave, there we won't talk because we know that generally people feel women always take time off to go and have children. But what can they do? That is one of their biological function, if we can say it in that way. So gender transformative and gender responsive planning and budgeting, this is one thing we've been trying to push with NGOCC and others. How can public financing support more gender transformative interventions, even at public service level? Can go to the next. Okay, so I'm almost there. We've seen this cabinet. We've seen, I think it's no-brainer, the good policies which were there then with this set of all-male cabinet at that time. And we can move. This one for me is a picture. I know that, I think it has been updated, but I couldn't find the updated one when I was searching. But all I wanted to bring out in the way that we are configured, who makes the decisions? You fill in the blanks. That the tier in which they are appearing is the tier of the power that they have. So where of women, you fill in the blanks. They are there, but are they in the top tier? Are they decide? One, Madam Doreen Mwamba says, I need more pads in schools, free for the girls. Will people listen? So all we are saying is, we have come a long way. That is not in dispute. But we still have quite a lot that we need to do. The last slide, I think. Okay, we can now click the next tab, then we are good. So, on this particular picture, I want to just give another story. We've seen Madam Tambatamba, Honorable Tambatamba, next to Honorable Siakalim. Somebody once told me, Womba, these your friends, that's how he put it, your friends in parliament need to be trained. And I asked, what do you mean they need to be trained? No, they don't debate sensible issues. They don't say anything concrete. All they do is compete with their outfits and their hats. I was very offended, but I had to listen because he called me. And at that time, the person who called me was a member of parliament. And he went on. And all I could say, Honorable Member of Parliament, Honorable so-and-so, I'm very grateful, I have heard. So, this brings me now to my other point. How do we portray these women? I still hold the view that the few women we have, they are trying their best. They are doing their best. But out of the house of so many men, first and foremost, your story or your debate might not even make headlines. If your story makes headlines, it will be in a very misconstrued way. We saw how one of the ministers, I won't even name in case I'm quoted, was trying to talk about defilement. But the way in which media ran away with it, removed from what she was trying to say. All she was trying to say is, please, men, let's desist from this. The head of state said the exact same thing in a different way on Women's Day. And we saw how that story was. All we are saying, even when we talk to media, even myself when I talk to media, I say, let's have a positive portrayal of women. Let us portray them in the positive light of what they are trying them, in the positive light of what they are trying us today. You are going to see how the headline of what was stated yesterday has gone. I know we were sitting here, we understood the context in which that statement was said. But when the headline is like that, what does it say? We know what is being communicated. But because communication has multiple facets, people will run away with the smoke and leave the real essence of what is being communicated. So, in saying that, this is my last slide, we need a transformational approach to zero tolerance against violence in any form. And this transformation approach should be for all of us. Not only us, because we are judicial officers, but everybody, even our communities, even our children. What are we communicating to our boys in our homes? What are we communicating to our boys and girls in our communities? So the promotion, of course, and protection of human rights, and especially the rights of women, meaningful participation. I still insist, who is at the table? Yes, and this is what I think Madam Anamela said, Mr. Kamanga also said it. We have a female vice president, but who is really making the decisions? We have a female speaker, but who is really making the decisions? So we really need to interrogate all these things. Legislative and policy reform, that we can't belabor the point, we've talked a lot about it. Pursuit for justice and rule of law. I think we heard in the morning, there is a perception that there is a dichotomy with which the rule of law is applied. But it should not be that way. We should all be equal under the law, as it were. Conscientization. This one is it's a terminology, I think, emanating from ourselves as gender practitioners. Conscientization of all judicial officers. The whole chain. I just started with the clerks, but everybody needs to understand. If I am prosecuting a case that is rape, it will be different from the way I would do motor theft. If I am doing defilement, even worse. Why? Because there are so many power issues at play there. So I can't treat it as a case is a case, no. I have to have a different way in which I approach it. Even though we know that constitutionally, legally, yes, everyone has a right to a free and fair trial. But there are certain things where in your mind you just have to know, how do I approach this? And I think as we've worked with NPA through the years, even previously when, let's say, the public prosecutors at that time sat in the Zambia Police Service, we still had, in fact, I think the first people from NPA who were akin to these issues, Madam Hambai was one of them. We would do trainings with her, specifically for police officers, arresting officers, even the ones at general duties there. Because how do I have, right in this era, a police officer saying, in local language, unawa misa, that's why wanakuchita defilement. Who does that? Who says that? So there are all those things. Is it my fault? Okay, given you will not dress properly all the time, but there is no excuse. Now this, in Mrs. Hambai's words, there is no justification. So anyway, I'll end in the next 1 minute. I just wanted to say, we really need to conscientize everybody on these gender issues. It will not be the same. If it's violence against women in elections, that's a whole new, different matter altogether. It means we have to psych a different way in which we apply our mind, our brain, looking at the law, looking at the criminal procedure code, and everything that we use when we are prosecuting these cases. So, willingness to defy the odds. Now, I'm speaking to all of us as the sentinels of democracy, because the odds would always be against us. There is always a naysayer. There is always someone who will cry foul. There will always be collateral damage. But we should be willing to defy the odds, stand for what is right. Ethical use of technology and internet. The manosphere, if we had time, I would have gone deep into that. It's a whole world on its own, a whole planet, where men just sit in a group and they recruit online. Someone mentioned algorithms. That's what they use. They just use algorithms. Before you know it, you have, let's say, 4 billion, 1 billion views, and maybe half of that have reacted. What do you do when the whole world has believed something which is not even true, but because of AI and all manner of things, it looks like it is true? So digital safety, ethical use of internet, gender stereotypes, there are all these things that are still with us. And I will lastly just say something. Depending on which scholar you look at, we have at least 123 years. This is the least amount of years you may find to attain gender equality, meaning we are very, very far behind. Other scholars may say, no, it's about 300 years. Other scholars say it's 150 years behind for us to get to a level where there is gender parity, where men and women are treated equally, fairly, and are able to come to the same point, be interviewed on the same parameters, without prejudice, without any malice per se. I thank you most sincerely for your indulgence.
Thank you very much for that presentation. Does anyone have a burning question, intervention? Okay. The mic at the far end there. Item, may we have the mic at the far end?
I've been given a mic. I don't know if I can speak. Thank you so much for the presentations that have been given. I think for me it's not a question, but more of a comment, and generally not only to the two able ladies up front, but to all of us. And we're talking about women empowerment. I think that's the best term that I can bring upon. It is very good, and I think we've done a lot, seeing from the presentations from 1985 to date. But my question, which I've been having recently, is what are we doing as women lobby groups to prepare the boy child for the woman we are empowering? We're creating a very powerful girl and leaving out the boy child and then complaining about the boy child not working and the boy child being a junkie. So for me, I think let's have a change of approach where we have a two-tier approach. Prepare the girl and prepare the boy to be receptive to the girl's power that you are giving. Because as long as we keep on empowering the girl and not preparing the recipient, I think we'll still be talking about this 100 years like you are saying. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for that very valid point, because a lot of people in recent times have raised that issue. Well, for NGOCC, I should first state from the, from the onset that we focus on women and girls, and we're not apologetic about that, because that is informed by some of these statistics that we see. So we decided to focus on women and girls. However, gender is about men and women, boys and girls. And right now, the National Men's Network, some of you may know the National Men's Network, are actually a member of NGOCC, and we work together. They focus on the boy child, on preparing boys that are in school, and also in engaging men who, especially those who have been, perpetrators of GBV, to see how those can be used even to work with other men to prevent GBV, just as an example. So we do note that there is a need to also prepare the boy child. But for NGOCC, because of the statistics that we have, we focus mainly on the well-being of the woman and the girl, and we urge other organizations like the Men's Network to come up and also look at the issues of boys. Thank you. And maybe just to add one thing, I think I did mention about the issue of early child marriage. When we go into these communities and find girls that have been married off early and retrieve them from these marriages and put them back into school, when we find young boys as well, we do the same. We take both of them, engage the traditional leaders, the parents, the communities, and make sure they get back into school. So when it comes to issues like that, we don't discriminate. Thanks.
Thank you very much for that question. From the WUDAF point of view, we have a number of interventions that also focus on the boy child. I'm not too sure if you've heard about a program that was done between 2018 to about early last year called the Boys to Men program. It was done across 47 districts. Of course, Zambia is huge with 116 districts, if I'm not mistaken. So our interventions will always be thin, given budgetary and other challenges that we may face. But there are a number of interventions we do that focus on the boy child as well, including mentoring boys to men, as I said, that one which was under the USAID, but with the executive order that was passed last year by the US president, we had to stop the GBV program that had that component. But also there are a number of programs we are currently undertaking, such as reproductive health programs that try to support the youth-friendly corners where boys are a very crucial component of those, and we do support them. But I do agree with you that we can do more in that area. Thank you.
Thank you. The mic, please. There.
Good afternoon, everyone. I followed carefully the presentation that was done by all the three presenters. Yes, what stood out for me was the presentation on gender inequalities. As the presenters actually, I can say all the presenters touched on this, more especially the first presenter, who made mention to say at some point when they wanted to open a bank account, they did actually face some challenges. It brought me to a situation where I also found myself in a similar situation. I looked at it from a different angle. It was at a time when I was applying for a passport. And I realized that there are certain things that females are not allowed to do, especially when it comes to giving information, especially when swearing the affidavit. So I looked at it from a different perspective. In an election year that we are in, of course, there will be different stakeholders that will have to check the ballot papers and everything of that sort that will have to be printed, let's say, outside the country. And then we will have females that will also have to go and witness whether the same was done in a proper way. But if they are not given that opportunity to travel outside the country for failure of just getting a passport, it will be difficult for them. So I just want to find out from the NGOs, what is it that you're doing to sensitize, especially those from the Department of Passport, where it comes to giving certain information, because it's only restricted to males giving certain information. If you fail to do so, you cannot get that passport. And I'm particularly making reference to the case of Nawakwi versus AG, which is a 1991 case, where it was clearly stated that a parent can either be a mother or a father, and they can all give that information. But it's like we're still riding on archaic laws, especially in our country, where females are not allowed to give certain information. I just want to get the views from you, from the NGOs perspective. Thank you.
Thank you so much for highlighting that matter. I mean, it's very concerning if that's where we still are. And this case that you referred to, the Nawakwi versus AG, was where she won the case where, as a single mother, you are permitted to get a passport for your child. I mean, we know that the reality of life is that sometimes there are absentee fathers. And where a father was absent, you know, a woman, a single mother, was not in a position to get a passport or to provide information around a passport. And our understanding as NGOCC was that this was sorted with this case. But if this is still the case, it means this should be one of our advocacy issues. It should be one of the issues we are going to take up. Frankly speaking, we have office around this. But thank you for that information, and we shall take it up.
Any last intervention from my left side? Okay, looks like the left, over to you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the insightful and very powerful presentations. Mine, I think looking at the issue of women and elections, my thinking is that the whole story rests at adoption stage. You realize that the government has put a number of measures pertaining to women as well as elections. I'm talking about provisions such as nomination fees that favor women candidates. But then we have few women that are being adopted, especially by political parties, to participate. And so these measures find nobody to service. I was proposing that it's high time we started looking at legislations that would promote terms and conditions mandating political parties to have a certain percentage of women across the country. It may not be maybe in a district, but across the country, to be adopted. because it all starts there. Few women are being adopted in these elections. So we'll put a number of measures, but at the end of the day, we'll see more women in local councils as well as cabinet. At grassroots level, I think it's also important to tell a girl child or female children that, look, you can be who you want to be in life. This will help eliminate self-segregation as women, because at times we are given opportunities, but then there's something speaking in our heads that, look, I can't, these jobs are for men. So I was thinking that those two measures somehow will help increase the women participation in political spheres as well as elections. Thank you very much.
Thank you again for that. I think by the time I spoke, I did allude to the fact that the political parties were the main gatekeepers around adoption for women. And one of the things I said we're working on as NGOCC or advocating for is a political parties law. This has been, there's been a pushback for against this law by all political parties whenever whether they've been in power or in opposition. And the reason has been that it has provisions for them to disclose their sources of funding. So simply because of that clause, political parties have pushed back. But if you were to see the draft, it's got very, very progressive clauses around inclusion of women, youth, and persons with disability. So indeed, I do agree that we need something that would compel political parties to ensure that this challenge at adoption is addressed together with all the other issues such as extortion and other issues. But it also calls for intra-party reform. As long as these parties are led by men, we will still see what is happening because the decisions that they make are not informed by the lived experiences of women. So I think on that, that's what I would say. And around the confidence of girls as they grow up, indeed, some of these issues that we're addressing, when we talk about norms, beliefs, these issues begin in the home, it's in the schools, it's in the churches. So this is why it all needs a coordinated approach to address the issue of bringing up a girl child or a boy child, because the boy child must also understand that the girl child is just as capable. We see now how the girls are doing at grade 12. This is because of sustained advocacy and, conscientization to make sure that parents treat girls the same as they do boys and give them the same opportunities. Out of that now we see that girls do just as well as boys or even better than boys. So it's all about the whole community. I mean, we say in our traditional languages that it's the whole community that brings up a child. I know that the world has changed now, and when you try and even correct your neighbor's daughter, they will lash out at you and say, who do you think you are? Not my mother. But there are different aspects of communities that are responsible for different parts of and stages of the life of a child. And we should take that as a coordinated effort. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that question. It suffice to just say that you're correct to say the biggest challenge we have is at the adoption level. But it's only so because the policy and legal framework is very weak. Ideally, and I think even without waiting for the political parties' bill to be enacted, we have something we can start with, which is the Gender Equity and Equality Act. Because the Gender Equity and Equality Act mandates every state institution, including everybody, whether private or otherwise, to adopt 50% gender representation, to adopt programs relating to gender. But like I said, remember, the Gender Equity and Equality Act was passed in 2015. The Constitution in 2016, about January, thereabout. So you are looking at almost 11 years. And there's not just been that political will by the two administrations we've had to actualize and operationalize this legislation for reasons outside the scope of our discussion here. But what that does also is that it gives political parties the leeway to do whatever they want to do as though there are no laws to regulate that. And that's the biggest challenge that we have when it comes to that. It's very easy to use the Gender Equity and Equality Act to compel political players to adopt, the spirit of the Constitution, the spirit and letter of the Gender Equity and Equality Act in addressing the issues of adoption, in increasing the numbers of women to participate in the electoral process, not only as voters but also as candidates. And our failure to adopt these laws, to actualize these laws, is what has brought us here. And I'm one of those that I'm not too pessimistic, but I still feel that unless we do that, unless we address the gender machinery in the country, the 2026 elections might not offer a completely different picture in terms of favorable numbers for women. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The session is coming to an end, unfortunately. We are beyond our time. I just want to thank the panel for the insight made. The debate we can continue, and through the learned DPP, I would propose that we consider even having a virtual session, speaking to the issues that have been raised. I feel that the time has not been enough for us to discuss these issues to do with women participation. That would be my proposal. Thank you to the panelists. Another round of applause. And IT, I'm being reminded that you can play the video as we walk out for the former Liberian president. Thank you.
Your Excellency,
Your
I can hear.
Excellency,
We can
Madam Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, the former president of Liberia, the Aulin patron, I have mentioned but highlight the work you are doing with the young politicians, the women leaders in our continent, not just in Liberia, but in Africa, but in the entire world. So, Ma Ellen, please guide us in this conversation with the launch of the national chapter of Aulin in Zambia. Thank you.
Thank you, Benetta, for your kind introduction and for your very kind words. My warm greetings to all of you. Madam Moderator, I hope you allow me to depart from the usual protocol, given that so much and so many have been acknowledged already. However, I wish to acknowledge the presence of Madam Lutinta Hichilema, the First Lady of the Republic of Zambia, and to thank her for her kind words.
The DPP and his delegates to leave, and then the rest of us can proceed. The arrangements for lunch remain the same. The DPP, the guests, the high table, senior management will be saved from VIP. And then the rest of NPS staff, I'm told upstairs where you had your lunch from. And then our colleagues from other institutions, the coffee shop. We'll come back at, unfortunately you have to bear with me, we are behind time. We'll come back at 14:30. Yeah, that sounds like it's not good. DPP? It's okay, I've been informed it's okay. 14:30. See you later.
For 17 years, she has done what few dare. For 17 years, she wants to burn. She started at the Drug Enforcement Commission, cutting her teeth on complex financial trails. Today, she directs prosecutions at the Economic and Financial Crimes Department, chasing dirty money across borders, recovering stolen assets, and ensuring that no amount of political weight can tip the scales. Fearless, relentless, a thorn in the side of corruption. Please welcome Deputy Chief State Advocate, Yasir. For 17 years, she has done what few dare, taken on the powerful, drug lords, money launderers, politicians with fortunes to hide and influence to burn. She started at the Drug Enforcement Commission, cutting her teeth on complex financial trails. Today, she directs prosecutions at the Economic and Financial Crimes Department, chasing dirty money across borders, recovering stolen assets, and ensuring that no amount of political weight can tip the scales. Fearless, relentless, a thorn in the side of corruption. Please welcome Deputy Chief State Advocate, Wasilia Kunda Chipulu Mulinga. For 17 years, she has done what few did. Fearless, relentless, a thorn in the side of corruption. Please welcome Deputy Chief State Advocate, Wasilia Kunda Chipulu Mulinga. For 17 years, she has done what start Wasilia Kunda Chipulu Mulinga. For 17 years, she has done what few dare, taken on the powerful, drug lords, money launderers, politicians with fortunes to hide and influence to burn. She started at the Drug Enforcement Commission, cutting her teeth on complex financial trails. Today, she directs prosecution